So let's go. Thanks for joining me today. So our session today is about grammar to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the book English Grammar in Use. Grammar is something that I have a love-hate relationship with. And today I wanted to challenge you to think about grammar differently. So our session today will be about 7 actionable tips to teach grammar in a more effective and engaging way. That's a great topic, I think. So just about me quickly, so that you understand why I'm here and why I have like some tips for you today. So I'm a French person. I've learned English at school for 10 years, and then 5 years I have a master's degree and bachelor's degree in foreign languages, LEA. And I have, as I said, a love-hate relationship with grammar. So it took me 15 years at school, plus a lot of learning on my own to be fluent in English. Today, I'm an entrepreneur. I have my online business. I have a YouTube channel with more than 300,000 people. I've written a book. I have launched a web app, and I have courses to teach French people how to speak English. And now I speak English fluently, hopefully, and I speak other languages, Spanish, German, and other languages. So that's about me. So as I said, I've always had a difficult relationship with grammar. I was a really good student at school. I had good grades in English. I could remember everything, like all the irregular verbs. I understood grammar really well, but I could not speak. I was really stuck in English. I was really unconfident. I was not comfortable when speaking. So I knew the grammar. I knew all the rules. So it like the traditional teaching of grammar really worked for me, but it did not help me to speak. That's why I want to change. I want to try to change your perspective on how to teach grammar, because I think we can teach it in a more engaging and more effective way. So the first principle and first tip I want to share with you is use the Pareto law or the 80-20 law to teach grammar rules that students actually need. So I personally teach English with the 80-20 principle, like grammar, vocabulary, everything. I use this principle and I teach 20% of the vocabulary, grammar that is actually useful for speaking. The idea here is to teach the 20% of the grammar rules that are useful when speaking, because that's ultimately what we want. We want students to be able to communicate in English, not like we don't want them to learn everything by heart and master the grammar, but not speak. And that was my case when I was a student. So don't teach all the 12 tenses in English, but focus on the 3 first that are the most common. That's my perspective on tenses. So here on the screen, you can see a representation of all the tenses in English. And you have like the bigger square is the most used tense, is the present simple. And then we have the past simple and then future, etc. The idea here is that people don't need, and students don't need all 12 tenses to be able to communicate. Students and beginners should start learning what's really useful for them at the moment they are, at the level they are. So what I recommend you is teaching not like the full tenses and then move on to modal verbs and then move on to preposition, but when you teach tenses, try to teach what's really useful to not overwhelm them, what they actually need. So start with the top 3 tenses. So that's present simple, past simple, and future simple. And then you can move on to more and more tenses as people improve. But teaching everything at once is complicated for students to handle and to comprehend. My next tip is to copy how we've learned our mother tongue. So we had a lot of exposure to our mother tongue, French, for most of you, or for me at least. We were exposed to the language. We heard our parents and people talk around us for many years before we had grammar explanation. When we learn a foreign language, it's really funny because we do the other way around. We often start with teaching grammar and the concepts and the rules and everything, and then we add some vocabulary and then figure out how to make a sentence with all of that. So we didn't learn our mother tongue the way we learn a foreign language, and that's a shame, I think. We need exposure to the foreign language before we can understand the rules. So students need a lot of context before they can understand grammar. And I think it's okay if they make mistakes first, because that's how we learn our mother tongue as well. We start to speak, we make mistakes, and then we understand as we go. So I really recommend you to just try to shift the perspective and not just, try to remember how you've learned your mother tongue as you were a child, and try to emulate that for when you teach a foreign language. My third tip is just-in-time learning versus just-in-case learning. I don't know if you've heard about this concept before. Just-in-time learning, it means that you are going to learn something that is useful and that you can understand and that you can reuse at the level that you are right now. If you teach something that is just in case, you teach grammar rule, you teach a concept that students will use in the future, which is great sometimes. But if it's something that they cannot understand and they cannot reuse quickly, they will forget and it will be too overwhelming and too complicated for them to learn. So I really recommend you to teach something just in time, at the right time, at the right level, instead of teaching just in case. And at school, when I was at school, when I learned English, it felt like I learned a lot of things just in case. I had so much grammar to understand and to remember that I did not reuse quickly after. So yeah, teach the right rules at the right time. For example, you could have exercises about the weekend, talk about your weekend, what you've done, and then you can teach past tenses. It has to have a meaning. It has to have a context. Otherwise, your students will learn just in case and will probably forget. And just in time and just in case is also about the level of your students. If you teach something really complex, for example, the present perfect continuous to a beginner, this person will not remember. So what's the point? I'm just going to stop for a few seconds to see how you react in the comments if there's any question, and I will move on to the next tips just after. So let me just see where the comments are. So anything you want to share, any aha moment or any question you have, just please ask me in the comments. Yes, someone is asking if there's a Q&A after the session. Yes, there will be one if I go quickly enough. So far, so good. Okay, let's keep moving. All right, just in case, just in time. Yes, next tip. My fourth tip for you today is to simplify grammar to make it easy and easy to understand. Think bite-sized grammar instead of having the whole grammar rule. Try to not use too many complicated words, because I felt like when you teach with the way you've been taught by grammar nerds, not all of your students will understand what you say. Avoid using too many complicated words. Try to put yourself in the shoes of your students. They are not teachers. They haven't studied grammar for years. You have, but your job is to make grammar so easy that it's easy for them to understand. Your role, I think, is not to make them experts. They don't need to be experts at grammars. They will not teach grammar for most of them, but they will need grammar and they will need English to speak. So I think we often make the mistakes of wanting our students to be perfect, to have a perfect grammar, to understand everything. And we teach grammar the way we've been taught at school and then at university, but that's not always the most effective way, because most of you students won't teach grammar and they don't care as much as you do. So they need to know enough to be able to speak. Well, that's my opinion, at least. So the purpose of teaching a foreign language is not like having them have the perfect grammar. The purpose is for them to have enough rules, enough concepts to be able to speak and communicate and be confident. My fifth tip for you is, there's a mistake, sorry, make grammar fun and engaging. So it's not because it's grammar that it has to be boring. Yes, grammar is really structured. We can teach it in a very traditional way. We can teach all the tenses. We can make it like really straightforward. or we can try to challenge ourselves and make it fun and engaging. We often use flashcards to remember vocabulary. So there's one side with French and the other side with English, but we don't use that much for grammar, but we could. You could have like sentences with a grammar concept on one side and then the French on the other side. We can make grammar fun and engaging. But we've been taught we've been taught grammar in a very traditional way, at least that was my case. And it's often, we have to think outside of the box to make it different and make it engaging, but it's possible. You can use board games. I've used them a lot when I had students. Board games, for example, about questions about your weekend, about your previous vacation, and then you can teach tenses with that. Or you can have, board games is a really fun and engaging way to teach grammar. Play the game and then teach the rule. You can use quizzes. I've used the website Kahoot. I think there are many different options, but quizzes, interactive quizzes with students is a great way to make grammar fun and different. Remember when I taught English in a business schools, we always had like a Kahoot thing, a quiz, maybe not every week, but every 2 or 3 weeks, and students were really happy with that, and they were really, it was easier for them to engage with the content that I was teaching during the few weeks before the Kahoot thing, because they wanted to have the game is fun, and it made them want to listen to what I had to say in class. You can use videos, everything that could make it more fun, basically. So as I say, grammar doesn't have to be boring. Challenge yourself to make it fun and engaging. There are so many tools online, so many things you can use, and I think it's just about thinking outside of the box. Let me drink some water. Oh. My next tip for you is to try what's called the flipped classroom. I think you've heard about it, I guess, and make students teach and explain. So when you teach something, most students will not remember everything you say. You see here the pyramid learning, and you see the retention rates, or the percentage of retention of information retention, depending on how you teach something. So you can see the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The first 5 layers are passive learning. So there's when you teach, when students read, when it's audio or visual, and when it's a demonstration. I think most of the time, unfortunately, we teach grammar and English in a really passive way. Sometimes we have no choice, to be honest, but we can try sometimes to blend some passive learning and active learning. So if you have discussion in groups, students will remember 50% of what they learn, of what they do. If you teach if they practice, if they do board games, if they talk to each other, if they are engaged with the content, they will remember 75% of what they learn. That's amazing, right? And if they teach others, they will remember 90% of what they learn. I think this is magical. So it's not about, it's not black and white. It doesn't have to be one thing or the other, but you can for sure have a mix of these different layers and and try to balance passive learning and active learning a bit more. So this could be make students research something in advance. It could be have them fill in exercises before the class, or it could be make them teach something or explain something to each other. But for sure, having them engage with the content and be proactive will help them remember things better, and it will make your job easier, I guess. Less preparation for you, so that's always good. My last tip is about embracing errors. I know grammar is right or wrong, and it's easy to grade people, a lot easier than when you have an essay or you write something or you speak, because it's less like right or wrong. That's why grammar is really hard, I think, to teach in a different way, because it's easy to grade people. It's either right or wrong. It's easy to have tests with grammar. It's easy to have exams. But with this, I think comes the flip side of that is that people then are really afraid to make mistakes. I see so many adults who come to me 10, 20, 30 years after high school, and they are traumatized, not by school, sometimes they are, but by making mistakes. They're afraid of making mistakes, they're not confident, it prevents them from speaking, it holds them back. So I think that's a shame because the purpose for me of grammar is not having people be experts and know everything and be able to teach grammar if they want to, be teachers. Like 95% of people who will learn with you, they will not need perfection. They will need just enough. They will need to communicate, and it's okay if they make mistakes. So I think we have to it's okay to grade students, it's okay to correct them, but it's okay to leave some room for error, and it's important to remember that it's, for me, the goal is not to make them perfect at grammar. It's to have enough knowledge and know enough of grammar to be able to be confident and actually speak, and not be embarrassed by mistakes, because a lot of French people are really ashamed of their mistakes and it prevents them from speaking. And that's not the purpose, I guess. The purpose is to allow them to be confident and speak and actually use the language and not just not speak because they are too embarrassed. Here you can see, so to go back to the 80-20 principle, and I think that's the most important thing about this presentation, is thinking outside of the box. I think is important because we've been teaching grammar in a traditional way, in a really structured way, in a really straightforward way for so many years. And I think with a few changes here and there, we can make grammar really more effective, really more engaging, and we can change the relationship people have with English. Because as I said to you, I see so many people come to me 20 or 30 years after learning English at school, and they cannot speak. So I think that's a shame. And I don't say like grammar is to blame, but the way we teach grammar has to do with this. So here in this chart or something, you can see like the A1, A2, B1, etc., the CECRL levels, and the amount of time you need to reach that level, and the amount of words and the amount of grammar structure you need to reach that level. So people don't need like the full, I don't know how many grammar rules there are, but the full, let's say, the full grammar, English grammar, to be able to speak. They don't need like to know the 100,000 words that are in the dictionary. They need just a bunch of words. They need the most common words to be able to get by when they first start. And it's the same for grammar. They don't need to know everything. They need to know the right things at the right time to be able to start speaking. What do you think about that? So I'm just going to unshare my screen and see if you have any questions and answers about that. All right. Let me know if you have anything. So any of you use Kahoot, the interactive quiz online?
You actually have a question, Leah, in the Q&A. There's been a number of them in the chat, so I just remind people if they can kindly put them in the Q&A so we do catch them. You have one in the Q&A as we speak asking, do you actually, just a recommendation, do you explain your grammar points in French or in English for teenagers specifically?
So I teach in French. Yes, because I think so what we want, so there are two things. I think we want students to have exposure to the language, and we want them to understand your grammar and comprehend the rule well enough to be able to then go on their own and to speak the language using this grammar structure. So I think a lot of students, a lot of teachers, sorry, say, I think a lot of people come to me after learning English at school, and they blame teachers who teach in French because they think because they teach grammar in French, we don't have enough exposure to English. But I think it's better to explain it once and for all, once properly in your mother tongue, and they understand it, than explaining in English and they will keep making the same mistakes because they don't fully understand. So I personally teach in French. And I think teaching in French helps you to, um, I can share something with you. So something that I did not mention here, but I think is important is I don't really teach starting with the grammar rule first. I teach with the telling first what mistakes people make. So because a lot of French people will make the same mistakes because they often think in French and translate into English after. I'll show you something. It's easy to know beforehand what mistakes they will make. So how I teach grammar is a lot different from what how I've been taught when I was at school. So what I do personally is I explain French because I think it's easier to understand in your mother tongue. And if you need to understand, you need to know enough English to be able to understand an explanation in English. So I think it's for me, it's better to explain in French, especially for beginners and teenagers, than explaining in English. There's yeah, it's great to have exposure to English, but I don't think teaching grammar in English makes sense. So as I said, I don't teach grammar in a really traditional way. I will not teach like all the tenses, all the modal verbs. I know what mistakes French people make, and I'm sure you do because you see so many students, and it's the same mistakes that come over and over again. So what I do is I try to teach English in a bite-sized way and not like the full rule. I will just take one mistake and then explain why I'm sure you will make this mistake and explain once and for all why you make this mistake. And then just explain this specific mistake people make, but not teach like the full, all the exception to the rule, everything, because they don't need to understand everything at once. They need to know enough to be able to communicate. For example, here, so depuis has two translation in English. So there are two words, and in French, there's just one. And that's something people struggle with to understand. So when French people speak, they will often mix them up. And they will often say, for example, I have learned English since 10 years. This is a common mistake. So why teach the full rule in English and people don't really understand it? Instead, what I do is I teach, yeah, I know that you make this mistake and you will make it because you translate from French to English. And that's why I like to explain in French because once they understand why they make the mistake, they are empowered to just change that and just be mindful of this specific grammar rule, but they will be empowered for more. So when they understand that the root of why they make mistakes, in from French to English is often because they translate from French to English, then they will be empowered and they will have they will understand how to correct themselves for other type of mistakes. Um, so this is a document that I've created with the 100 most common mistakes French people make in English, and it's like a shortcut to speaking English effectively and confidently because a lot of people will learn grammar in a really traditional way. Most of people will not understand, and maybe they understand when you teach them, but then will they actually use it? Will they keep making mistakes? That's probably true. Most people will understand when you explain the tenses and all of that, but once they are on their own and they try to speak English, they will often be stressed, embarrassed, afraid of making mistakes, and then everything will be it will be chaos in their head, and it's hard once they start to speak to remember the grammar rules and grammar structure. So I think it's also one thing to remember is we teach grammar in a classroom, then they have an exam, then they do great, it's fun, it's great. But then when they actually want to speak, will they remember the grammar structure? The purpose of teaching grammar is not have them have good grades. It's good for them, but the purpose for me is making them empowered enough, confident enough, and know enough to be able to speak and not be embarrassed and afraid of making mistakes. Yeah, so for example, this one here, take breakfast and take coffee. This is not really something we teach when we teach grammar because it's not like in most of your grammar books, it's not really a grammar rule, but it's something like people struggle with. A lot of French people will say, I take coffee or I take whatever croissant for breakfast or something. But this is a mistake, right? Because we don't take breakfast, we don't take coffee. We say have coffee or drink coffee. And that's what I like to teach because it's really bite-sized, it's easy to understand, it empowers people because it's really simple to understand, and then they will instantly fix this mistake. Maybe not instantly, but they will after some time. It's easy to understand, and it's easy to make progress. I think grammar sometimes is a bit too overwhelming because we try to dump everything at once to students, and then what do they do with that, right? So when you teach a really specific structure, a specific mistake, it's easier for them to grasp it, to understand it, and to stop making this mistake. And it empowers them to correct themselves on their own. And I think it's lighter, right? And more it's easier for them and easier for us, I think, to teach. Yeah. Are there other questions? Let me see. So, yes, maybe I can talk about grammar in use for a second, because I think this is a why, and I think that all goes back to the same thing. This book has been a huge success because Mr. Murphy managed to make grammar more fun, more engaging, and he managed to make students um, um, more active, more proactive with the exercises. And also, he did not use that complicated words. He simplified grammar, like 2 pages, one side grammar explanation, one side exercises. That's how I teach grammar, basically. So I think the success of this book shows that grammar has been taught in a very traditional way for many years, but it doesn't have to be. The purpose of grammar is not to make them experts. The purpose for me is just to give them enough and teach them enough and to empower them, students, to be confident and just to be able to speak and have enough confidence to just go out there and talk, not just be experts, right? All right.
Leah, you have another question from
Yeah,
the
sure.
Q&A section, asking you if you have any advice on how to get students to just write or speak without being focused on being grammatically perfect.
Wow. I think, yeah, I would say that everything you've done as a teacher before telling them this exercise will help if you correct them. I mean, it's the way you approach mistakes because they will emulate what you do. So if you correct them all the time, if you make them stress about the exams and stuff, if you have exams regularly, I think it's how you approach it that will people will resonate how, on we resonate to how you approach things, I guess. So yeah, it's hard to hard to find a right answer off the top of my head, but yeah, it could be. I think it's about. I often tell my students that grammar, we make a fuss about grammar, right? About mistakes and all of that. But the truth is, grammar is not what will make you not be understood. So if you say, I've learned English since 10 years, you understand me, right? If you say, yesterday I have not worked, that's not correct. It should be a past tense, but you understand me, right? So grammar mistakes are not really a problem to be understood. So once they understand that it's okay to make mistakes and you learn from making mistakes, I think it's easier for them to embrace mistakes, right? So I would say like explaining like a grammar, we make yeah, first about grammar, but the most important thing is to communicate and to be understood. And it's not because you make mistakes that you're not understood. So making mistakes is okay. And the more mistakes you make, the more I can correct you, right? And I think it's also a thing. When I was teaching students one-on-one, I would say like, just go all in, just talk and make mistakes. I'll write down notes, and it would be easier for you to understand when I explain the concept if you've made the mistake, because I can point it out and I know you make this mistake. I can explain you why you make this mistake. For example, you tell me, I took coffee this morning. I can tell you this is not correct, and it's easier for you to understand once you've made the mistake. So I think we should just tell them, I guess, that making mistakes is okay. It's part of the process. You will still be understood even though you make mistakes. And when you make mistakes, it's easier for you then to correct yourself, I guess.
Thank you very much, Léa, for
My
today's
pleasure.
webinar, for your participation. We're getting towards the end of this session. So thank you again for being with us today. And thank you all for following up.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.